The Legend of Gatotkaca is a crazy Indonesian superhero film, but will it save us from a Marvel rut? Let's find out now. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass, and I'm here to talk to you about The Legend of Gatotkaca, which I'm pretty sure I'm saying wrong. But in any event, it's coming to digital DVD and Blu-ray on March 21st, 2023 from our friends at Wellgo USA. This is an Indonesian superhero film, and my hot take is, look, I think you should rent it. This is kind of a tough one for me to call because it is a very epic film. It's got a lot going on. It has some fun fights and some pretty good choreography, as you would expect from Indonesian cinema, but it also has a very convoluted story. It's often hard to follow, and some of the effects are less than stellar. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the film, a few things I liked, a few things I didn't like, and maybe briefly touch on a few things that happened. I'm not going to touch on a lot because it's a pretty dense, kind of involved film, but I will mention a few things in the things I liked and things I didn't like. So as you can imagine, there will be spoilers in some of those sections. I will be clear when I get into spoilers, so you don't have to worry about that until you hear my warning. But before that, I will keep it vague so you can keep watching. So in Legend of Gatotkaca, you have this college kid who recently dropped out, Yuda, who witnesses the murder of his best friend, and afterwards kind of becomes drawn into this ancient fight between good and evil that he seems to maybe have some part in. And as he gets kind of deeper into this, he realizes there's a lot more going on and maybe a lot more that he has to do for this overall fight. The things I liked about this film: the first, hey, I like the action. Like, it has some pretty good choreography. It's got some pretty good fight scenes and things like that. It's an Indonesian film. Indonesian films tend to have pretty good choreography and hand-to-hand combat, and this was no exception. There's some kind of over-the-top stuff that is fun but also can be distracting. But if you're just looking for some fun action with kind of like a superhero tint to it, then this definitely has that. The second thing I loved are the characters, and this is kind of like the characters when you finally meet them all. There are a good number of characters that kind of come in during this film, and you don't really get to see them until maybe about halfway through. And so once you have all the characters, it's kind of fun to see all their interactions and how different they are. Before that, you just are basically stuck with Yuda and his friend Agni. Yuda's fun, and Agni is kind of a strong female character, but they're not as quirky as some of the other ones that come along halfway through the movie. And the last thing I liked is weird. There's like a weird-ish ending in this film, and some of it's kind of tough to follow. But there is one part that I really, really loved, and I'll tell you about that later after I get through the things that I didn't like as much. But there's this weird kind of over-the-top aspect that I really enjoyed. So the first thing I didn't love is the movie is pretty long, and that's partly because there's a lot of backstory here, so you have to go into some of the reasoning behind this this war between good and evil, and what who the players are and how they fit in. But that leads to a film that is very long. It's 130 minutes, which is a little over 2 hours, and it definitely feels like that. It kind of starts strong and then slows down in the middle and then picks up towards the end, and that leads to a middle that is pretty long and definitely feels like it. Second thing I didn't love is it's pretty hard to follow. There is a lot of backstory, like I mentioned, that it goes into, and the characters kind of come in and out. Some characters are referred to by different names, depending on who's talking to them, which may be a cultural thing, maybe not, but it's kind of also made it tough for me to follow because they'd be talking about someone and it would be referencing the same person, although maybe like a past version of them or some sort of like superhero version of them, and it was tough for me to follow on. Look, maybe if I grew up in Indonesia, or at least was exposed to these myths and legends and things like that, maybe it would have been easier to follow. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's a problem with the movie or if it's just like my background. But in any event, I found this movie pretty tough to follow and to kind of keep track of who all the characters were and the underlying mythology. And the last thing I didn't love as much are the effects. There's some pretty heavy CG in some scenes, and it is pretty noticeable. Thankfully, that's not a lot of it, but in the scenes where it's used and used kind of prominently, it is definitely something that distracted me. So now going into just a smattering of the ending, there will be spoilers here, but I just want to go into the thing I really loved, and that is kind of as the film kind of like progresses and gets deeper in, you find out that so Yuda is kind of like on one side, and this is the Pandava side, which are like the good souls, but it's not necessarily all good because they are just kind of more prone to kind of good aspects, but that doesn't mean that they're all good. Some Pandavas can do bad things. On the other side are the Kauravas, and they are kind of the more sinister. You can think of it as like, I don't know, Gryffindor and Slytherin, and like they tend to be bad, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. One of the characters that is helping Yuda and the other kind of Pandavas fight this is a Kaurava, but she is choosing to use her powers of destruction to help people, which is an interesting kind of play on this. You also find out partway through that Agni, who becomes one of like the Pandava superheroes, I guess, superhero characters, her father is a Pandava, but he is actually helping the Kauravas bring about the reincarnation of this super evil Lord Aswama. You can think of him like Sauron. And so when we find this out, it's like a big reveal. Oh my gosh, like he's been killing people trying to gather souls so that this lord can be kind of reincarnated and bring about like the Kauravas' rise to ruling the world. And so you're like, okay, that's weird. But then like he gets backstabbed by one of his soldiers, like his like second in command, backstabs him right at the end, and he now becomes the person, which I thought was like a little anticlimactic. But you finally find out this big reveal and there's a fight and you're like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then he just like gets backstabbed. And now this new person is the ultimate fighter who now has to fight Yuda, who has now kind of like become Gatotkaca. He's become like super powerful and absorb these heirlooms into his body and is able to kind of use them to transform into a superhero character. Like I said, it was a little bit tough for me to follow. But what I did like is when Gatotkaca kind of like gets all the power and the other guy kind of absorbs the power from Agni's father and becomes like the foil to him. They have this crazy like DBZ like fight scene where they fly up into the sky. Remember, like no one's flown before. This is all new. They fly up into the sky and just have like a straight up DBZ fight, even with like moving so fast you can't see, so you're not blinking. There was no Kamehameha, but they might as well have been. They were just like chucking each other into mountains and just, you know, destroying each other, like grabbing someone, flying to the ground, like, you know, rubbing them on the ground. It was a spectacle to behold, and I really enjoyed it. I think I wrote in my notes like this is insane, kind of ridiculous, but also really fun. So I really like that. Unfortunately, it doesn't last very long. It lasts for a couple minutes, and then you go back into a more conventional fight, which is also weird because they're fighting like in this grandiose scale, and then they break into like a mountain room, and then they just fight normally. I mean, heavily impacted, but they don't just instantly destroy this room with their superpower. They just fight regularly. So in the end, the Pandavas win. The Gatotkaca like defeats this other guy with the help of his friends, and thankfully Agni's father, I guess, was able to be redeemed, even though it was weird because remember when I said like he had killed all these souls to try to bring about the rebirth of Lord Atswama? When he finally gets backstabbed by this person, like he backstabs him, and then there's this long scene where everyone like cries about how sorry they are that he's dead. But also, I was like, dude, this guy killed so many people. Why are you all sad? Like he was a monster, even if he was like consumed by rage or blind, like he was still a monster, and they shouldn't have felt sad for him. But again, one of the nice things I guess at the end of the movie is you have Yuda and Agni, and they're after they save the world, stop the rebirth of this Lord Aswama, and I might be saying that, I'm probably saying it wrong. They're kind of talking, and she thanks him for like allowing her father to kind of have a nice karmic death. Like he was able to kind of like redeem himself in his death. So, you know, I guess that was part of the reason why they were so sad. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe he was finally pulling through and he was able to kind of like karmically redeem himself. But I don't know. He did some pretty terrible things. So there you go. That is the Legend of Gatotkaca. It is coming to digital DVD and Blu-ray on March 21st, 2023. Like I said, I think you should rent it. It is a tough movie to follow for me. Maybe it'll be easier for you, but I found it tough to follow. But there was definitely enough positive to enjoy this movie. So thanks so much for watching. If you liked this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you. Yuda, who has now become Gatotkaca after Gatotkaca. That is the Legend of Gatotkaca. The Legend of Gatotkaca.